Hi everyone, I'm Elle Lawless, Senior Nature Campaigner at Greenpeace Australia Pacific. Thank you so much for watching our submission writing party. We had so much fun with all of you. Thank you for contributing to creating a strong new nature law. Together, we'll put the government on notice and ensure that we close the deforestation loopholes once and for all. Hi everyone, I'm Elle. I'm Senior Campaigner here at Greenpeace Australia Pacific. Been with Greenpeace for about 3 months now. It's a really wonderful place, community to be a part of because it's so impactful and bold and, incredible in terms of making real change for climate and environmental justice. And we wouldn't be able to do that without all of you. So thank you for also being part of the community. So I am joining you all from unceded Ngunnawal, Ngambri, Ngarigo country, and I also wish to pay my respects to elders past and present and acknowledge that First Nations peoples have been caring for country for tens of thousands of years, long before the Environmental Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act was introduced in 2000. So just acknowledging that care for our environment that is ongoing. To set the scene, we're going to share a video with you from Koala Hospital in Queensland that our CEO visited last year. This is just to show the real impact of deforestation here in Australia, because every single second a native animal is killed due to deforestation, and Australia is a global deforestation hotspot along with places like the Amazon.
This is the face of deforestation in Australia. Most Australians would be shocked to know that koalas like this are not the exception. For years, we've been investigating Australia's deforestation crisis, and in 2024, a joint report between RSPCA and Greenpeace has found that 100 million animals are injured, killed or displaced every year on average. 100 million killed every year in our native forests.
Koalas have recently been listed as endangered, so pretty much every individual counts now. They're just such a unique animal, and the fact that they are declining, being able to hopefully help some of those remaining individuals really is a motivating factor for me. I'm certainly hoping that this report will be a call to arms that will get people and government to make some changes that means these animals will have a future on this planet with us. It does actually make me wonder if I'm still on this earth in 20 or 30 years' time, whether I will look back at this as a time when koalas were actually on a decline and think I was here to see the last of Queensland's koalas.
Deforestation in Queensland is a huge problem. It leads Australia in terms of rates of deforestation, and the majority is from agriculture, so clearing for beef production mainly. So right now, our national nature law is being reformed. This may sound very familiar to many of you because it's been going through a series of attempted and then failed reforms since 2020. When the Albanese government was re-elected this year, the Prime Minister decided that now was the time to get this done and then leave it for another generation. So it is really a huge opportunity and risk in terms of overhauling this broken law And that's why Greenpeace, along with many of our allies across the environment movement, are working really hard to ensure we have strong reforms. So the Act itself, it is a complicated piece of legislation. So I'll give us a brief overview of what it actually is. So you may have heard EPBC Act, lots of acronyms floating around, but it stands for the Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act. So this is Australia's central national environment law. All states and territories have their own environment law. This is the one that governs nationally. So it only came into effect in 2000, so 25 years ago. But it has been failing ever since. And in short, it's supposed to keep nature safe, but it's really failing to do what it says on the tin. So it is meant to protect what is known as matters of national environmental significance, which is often abbreviated to MNES. And these are ultimately like places, ecosystems, and wildlife that are of national significance. And that's because they're either like World Heritage Sites, they could be species at risk of extinction or that are in decline, or nationally significant wetlands, really significant ecosystems, biodiversity hotspots like the Great Barrier Reef. So currently over 2,000 plants, animals, and ecosystems are listed as threatened under the Act. So that's what we call our nationally threatened listed species. And that is growing every year. So every year, more species are being added to that list, as we've got threats including habitat loss and climate change, putting more species and ecosystems at risk, and clearly our laws and systems are not adequately protecting them. So I could probably do a whole webinar on how the Act is failing. This is a very short summary. So it doesn't embed First Nations knowledge, culture, and care for country. It also is just completely failing to stop coal mines, gas fields polluting our air and our water and destroying critical habitat. There is very weak enforcement and compliance. A lot of the definitions are really open to interpretation, which means that the government of the day or the environment minister themselves can really sort of choose how they wish to interpret things like what is a significant impact. It's all very loose, without those clear guidelines. And then also there's real lack of community involvement in the process. And ultimately it's just not fit for purpose. So you're all here tonight. You know that this matters. This is important. And that's really because our nature is in crisis. We saw in the State of the Environment report released in 2021 that concluded that Australia's natural environment was declining, and things are only getting worse for our rivers, wetlands, forests, reef, and also our health. So Australia leads the world on mammal extinctions. You may have already heard that, and we had a recent extinction on Christmas Island a few weeks ago as well. So the government rewriting this law right now, and it is our chance to turn things around, to really participate in our democracy and have our voices heard. because a stronger law could mean a safer climate, thriving wildlife, rivers, reefs, forests, and ultimately a healthy environment means a healthy planet, which is also beneficial for humans and for all of us, as we are part of nature. So, where are the reforms currently up to? This has been a very long and frustrating process, as I'm sure many of you are aware. So in 2020, there was an independent review released about the Act, and this is what's known as the Samuel Review. And ultimately, Professor Graham Samuel reviewed that the law was failing and inefficient and needed a complete overhaul. And he put forward a number of recommendations. So the Parliament has been in a long process in those 5 years of attempting to reform the Act. However, it seems to be quite a political hot potato. So just before the most recent election, we had the former Environment Minister, Tanya Plibersek, put forward reforms, but then they were all canned just before the election. Now we've had the Environment Department completely redoing everything again. So a draft reform bill was introduced to Parliament recently, and that was passed through the lower house. The new draft bill, there's some good steps in there, very few, but we are starting from such a low base on how poor this piece of legislation is. However, it's really critical time right now. We need voices from all across the country, and yeah, hearing where you're all from, which is really exciting, shows that we are from all across the country, and our voices really matter and need to be heard now. Now, my next few slides, I've done some flow charts just in case that's an easier way for people to understand the process of this legislation sort of as it gets reformed and goes through Parliament. And then I think we're stopping for questions. So please keep that in mind if it's just lots of text and lots of information on the screen, but I have tried to simplify it down. So if you start on the top left-hand corner, and then we'll go through each step via the arrows. We, as I said, we started with that independent review, the Samuels review, that determined that the Act was not. We had our long, frustrating 5 years as the government attempts to reform and then bins those reforms. So many of you have probably participated in the past in, really pushing for a strong new law. So thank you all for being part of our democracy and having your voice heard. So when Albo was re-elected this year, he decided, right, we got to get this done quickly. We want this through Parliament. And then they probably don't want to touch it for another generation. So now is really our chance. So then if we go to the middle of the slide, we've got the draft reforms tabled in Parliament on the 30th of October. It's very recently. You may have seen a fair bit of media on that. They're still really poor and dangerously weak for protecting nature. Then this bill was referred to a Senate inquiry for review. And that means that there is a call for submissions from the public and from organisations, which is why we're all here tonight. And submissions are accepted until the 5th of December. However, depending on what happens with the passage of the bill through Parliament, that could be closed early. And so it's really important that we have our voices heard as soon as possible and get our submissions in as soon as possible. And that Senate inquiry is due to hand down its report and findings in late March 2026. However, it's very likely that the bill, so the new nature law, could have passed before then. And that means sort of that will all just be tabled. So just for some extra detail on that draft bill tabled recently in Parliament, referred to the Senate inquiry. We've got open for public consultation. Would have heard that it did pass the lower house very recently. And apologies for those who already know this, but I feel like we didn't get a good enough parliamentary education at school. So we've got two houses of parliament. We've got the lower house, which is also called the House of Representatives, and that's made up of our MPs. So our MP that represents our electorate. And then we've got the upper house or the Senate, which is made up of senators. So you've got senators from each state and territory in there. And so the bill passed the lower house because Labor has the majority in the lower house. So it was very easy for them to just get that voted through with their majority. But it still needs to pass the Senate, which is where Labor doesn't have a majority. So they really need to do a so-called deal with the coalition or the Greens to get it passed. And that's where we can get it reformed to actually strengthen it up and get some real protections in there. And this could all happen very, very quickly, which is why we're making submissions tonight. So I recognize that that was a lot of information at once, and we will be sharing this with you after the webinar, but would like to open up to questions now. Tash, perhaps we could do a little Q&A together where you could read the questions out to me.
Yeah, fantastic. So we'll start off with Jackie. Thanks, Jackie. If Labor does a deal with the coalition or the Greens in the Senate, does that mean it's done and dusted?
It does, yeah. Thanks for your question, Jackie. So yes, if Labor does manage to do a deal with the coalition, so that would mean coalition put certain policies on the table of what they want this bill to look like in order for them to vote it through the Senate. Labor agrees to that. And then last sitting week of Parliament, which is end of November, they pass it. Yes, it could. However, we will continue to work on policy reform going forwards, regardless, to try and strengthen.
Amazing. We've got from Janet, does the bill cover newly discovered species while they're being assessed for status? Great question.
Sorry, Tash, you just froze for me. Could you please repeat?
We've got a beautiful question from Janet. Does the bill cover newly discovered species while they're being assessed for status?
Thanks, Janet. That is a lovely question. I heard on the radio tonight that a new bee was discovered today, a new native bee. While it is passing through Parliament, no, it wouldn't cover newly discovered species. Once it is in place as the new act, then yes, it would. But I will look further into that for you on further detail of your question. Thank you.
Amazing. Does this protect introduced species? For example, deer? That's a great question from Katie Flanagan.
Thanks, Katie. No, only native species. So deer are actually a feral species. So they are a a pest, and they cause a lot of harm to our natural environment, and need to be controlled as an invasive species. But no, this is just native species. Thanks for your question.
We have a question from Go here. And I think this is a really great one because you actually were doing it today. But the question is, what would you / Greenpeace put forward to strengthen the bill?
Yeah, that is a great question. I'm going to touch on that in a second. So what we have been focusing on as our main reform to the bill is closing the deforestation loopholes. So I will go into it in more detail, but at the moment we've got native forest logging and bulldozing for agricultural production is not assessed at all under the Act, even if it's threatening or like damaging critical habitat and killing threatened species.
Amazing. Okay, fantastic. Now, can it pass Parliament while the Senate inquiry is ongoing? What's the point of the inquiry if it's not been concluded and the bill is going to pass? That's from Monica.
Thanks, Monica. So yes, the bill can pass Parliament, even if the inquiry is ongoing, which is why we want to get our submissions in as soon as possible so that they can be considered by parliamentarians. And Greenpeace is appearing at the Senate inquiry hearings this Friday. So we're really making sure we are being heard while it's being considered. Good question about what's the point. So it will still review the community's view and organisations' views on the Act itself and produce a report that can then be used for amendments to the Act. But that's why we're really having our voices heard now. Thank you for the question.
Brilliant. Amazing. Everyone has such incredible questions here. Thank you so much. We will try and get to all of them. Now, if you could just check your message, Elle, and I'm just going to respond to a couple of these questions while you take a look at that. But for some of you that have written questions about what are the key points for the submission, like thank you so much, Elaine, for your question on what are the key points on the submission. We've got a few people asking sort of like, how do I structure that? Right after this session, which was more about information and that kind of thing, we're going to go straight into how to structure it and that kind of thing. So we probably won't answer that now because we're about to go into it. So really, really great points, because I also feel a bit like, oh, you know, I do this every day and I still feel like, okay, what's a succinct and great way to always kind of do these? So we will get to that one very, very soon. So the next question, can it pass in Parliament? Sorry. Will the definition of native species be redefined to include newly planted species? I really like that question because I don't know, Elle, if even animals like, say, the dingo are included as a native species, because these kinds of animals, even though they date back 4,000 odd years, and they don't quite know specifically, but, you know, are sort of native species being redefined within this, because obviously, yeah, there are some that are introduced but are now almost seen as native because they've been here for so long. So can you speak to that?
Yeah, that is a really interesting, like ongoing sort of topic of conversation. It's not been considered currently within the reforms to the Act. However, I know in some states and territories, they are in debates around species such as the dingo, whether that should be classified as like feral dog or as native animal. I know the ACT in particular are debating this at the moment and are really putting forward that should be classified as a native species. But no, it's not being considered in the current reforms of the National Act.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Elle. This is a great one, Linda. Why is climate change not included in the bill? This is a key threat to wildlife, yet somehow I believe it has been omitted.
Yes, so this is a really ongoing issue with the Act. So we know climate change is the biggest threat to nature. However, it's not adequately addressed at all in the Act. I would say, if I'm being candid, it's due to the power of the fossil fuel lobby and the fear of the government to then actually do something about emissions reduction. So we have been looking at other options to protect nature and also try and stop large-scale fossil fuel projects, so coal or gas. And that could potentially be done if we had stronger upfront nature protections. For example, if Woodside wanted to build a gas field where there were critically endangered species like a turtle, if we had stronger upfront nature protections, it would just ultimately be, no, you can't, because it will impact that species. However, currently only scope 1 and 2 emissions are considered in the Act. We're pushing for scope 3 to be considered, and also impacts of projects that would, contribute to climate change to also be considered. But yes, it is a big emission. Completely agree with you.
Amazing. Are there any watchdogs for endangered and threatened species that are not in a group considered significant impact cull of that threatened or endangered species, so that we don't have lots of little numbers kill of already threatened endangered species, as when it's a not significant impact, the minister doesn't need to approve development and it's a loophole?
Yeah, that is a loophole. We see a lot of, cumulative impacts across the landscape. And we get, fragmentation of habitat, even though in one spot it might be quite small, but then if it's happening everywhere, we're getting that cumulative impact across the landscape that's really impacting species. No, that is a big loophole in the Act. So I would say no, there's not a watchdog for that. We are trying to ensure that the new EPA could serve that purpose. But yes, still many holes. As many as Swiss cheese in this piece of legislation, starting from a very low base. But it's a really good point you bring up. So thank you for raising it.
Brilliant. That was a really good question and response. Thank you. Jeffers has written a quick cross promotion. The Biodiversity Council have come up with a fact sheet on the EPBC reforms a few days ago. And this is it, we're all in this together, and someone else asked a question about whether or not we are working as an alliance. Sorry, it was somewhere here. There's a lot of great questions here. So thank you, everybody. So if you want to speak to sort of working with other organizations and what we're sort of doing, whether it's collaboratively or separately, but knowing what each other's doing to work together, I'll leave that to you.
Yeah, of course. We work very much in alliance under what's known as the Places You Love Alliance. So I work very closely with other organizations such as BirdLife, Australian Marine Conservation Society, Australian Conservation Foundation, WWF, and many, many other brilliant ones. So meet with them regularly and work together regularly, including just this morning. So all connected. And Biodiversity Council are brilliant. So if you want to use their points, go for it. I'm sure they've got some great ones.
Amazing. I understand the draft bills claim climate change and the public national interest is irrelevant. This is a serious concern. Your views, please.
Okay, on national interest, so that is, for just simplified version, for those who might not know, that's where the minister or the prime minister can say, well, we want to build this project because it's in the so-called national interest, and then we'll override the Act and say, no, we're putting our nuclear plant here or our army base or whatever it is. That is a really big concern. Agree with you. We are advocating for much stronger guidelines on what is national interest, to ensure that ideally it can't be used, or it should be used in very strict circumstances with really clear rules around it. So I hope that answered the question. Yeah, advocating to remove or strengthen guidelines on it.
From Paul, from the viewpoint of Greenpeace, how many loopholes are you considering? Are you considering section 43B?
There are many loopholes. From the perspective of Greenpeace, we as we work, with our community, and we also do a lot of sort of lobbying and political meetings and detailed policy work as well, sort of more behind the scenes. So looking at much more detail on specifics there, but when we sort of go out publicly, it's much stronger to really narrow down to just a few messages, so just a few loopholes, which is why you would have been seeing that we've been going really strongly on the deforestation loopholes in a lot of our sort of advertisements. We did some billboards, our volunteers have been putting up posters, and that message really is cutting through strongly with our decision makers because we've heard that from them. 43B, I believe that's continuous use, but I'm not entirely sure off the top of my head if it's continuous use. Yes, that's part of deforestation loopholes, and we're going really strong on that. But yeah, if you just wanted to confirm which one you were referring to, Paul, that would be great. If not, I'll just look it up when I'm not talking to everyone right now.
Okay, so where are we at with climate trigger and ending native forest logging? Is there a national climate risk assessment mentioned and climate catastrophe?
Oh, I love your ambition. That would be amazing. Maybe we should vote you for Prime Minister. No, absolutely not. But yes, it should be there because we are in a climate emergency. But no. I think some other organizations are really doing brilliant work on climate. We're really pushing for those climate considerations, Scope 3 emissions, sort of ways to stop coal and gas projects. But yeah, loving the ambition. Let's keep working towards it.
Will this reform be applicable to all states? We currently seem to have very different laws across the states.
Yes, so every state and territory does have its own, environmental law. But this one is our national law, so it is applicable across all states and territories, but only when it's like impacts matters of national environmental significance. So that's our threatened listed species, or important, heritage places, Great Barrier Reef ecosystems, and sort of threatened listed, forests, wetlands, etc. Oh, good on you, Sharon. That's great. You're making a submission. Okay, these are really awesome questions. But I think we might need to keep going.
Can we just ask one more? Because I thought that this one was actually pretty important. And it was about, I can't find it. I don't even know who said it. So I apologize, but it was about if it doesn't get made by that time it's meant to close, they've got one more sitting week. What will that then look like? Can it be pushed back next year?
Yeah, that's a good question. And just going back to Paul's question, 43B is continuous use. And yes, we are working really strongly on that one, but I'll do a little rundown after our question time. If the new nature law bill doesn't get past the last sitting week of Parliament this year in November, then it will continue on throughout next year to continue being debated and negotiated by our parliamentarians when they get back in February. So it could continue for very many months longer. We do want to make sure it's the strongest it can be, noting it's still going to be weak.
Is that a question which I think a couple of you have asked now? Can you make more than one submission?
Oh, you definitely can. It's just, it wouldn't make that much sense unless you really want, had other materials or sort of recommendations that you wanted to put forward that was different from your other submission. Or if you just wanted to be kind of cheeky and just like hammer home your message and, get the committee hearing you, then like go for it. But I just don't think it's that worthwhile use of your time. Be more worthwhile to actually email your member of parliament and send them your submission and let them know what you've done. These are Greenpeace's recommendations to strengthening the draft bill. And these are the 4 that we've been going out strongly with through the media for quite a while now, in terms of we've been framing these as our test for success of a stronger bill, that this is what needs to be done. So I've got the stronger upfront nature protections, and a lot of that is around really strengthening definitions and removing the sort of indiscretions and bias that can exist where the minister or department can sort of determine, what is an impact, what isn't an impact. For example, I know Santos, when it was proposing to build the Narrabri gas project in the Pilliga, northwest New South Wales, there is a native mouse that lives in that forest called the Pilliga mouse. It's endemic to that forest, so it doesn't live anywhere else. And Santos said, oh, we promise we're not going to impact the mouse. And, the Environment Department can just interpret that under the Act as, oh, okay, it's not going to have significant impact. But there's no real way of judging that or having clear definitions. And then we want an actually independent environmental protection agency. So we want it to be making the final decisions, not the minister. And then we need considerations of the climate, because currently that's not in there. And then we're pushing really strongly for closing those deforestation loopholes, because we see that as a real opportunity we have to actually make a significant difference for nature in something that's actually winnable in reforming these laws. So on the deforestation loopholes, so we had Paul asking about this before, I think a few others as well in the chat. So these are these giant loopholes that you could quite literally drive a bulldozer through. So it means that native forest logging and most agricultural deforestation is just exempt from being assessed under the Act. So it doesn't have to go through any kind of approval process to determine, like, are there matters of national environmental significance there? How this impact it? Will we approve this activity or not? And what sort of mitigation can be put in place? None of that is done. And so native forest logging, many of you which were in place when the Act first came into effect, and that was to protect the logging industry. So the logging industry is completely propped up by taxpayers, and actually, according to the Bureau of Statistics, only employs 1,800 people nationally. And so we see native logging in our beautiful old growth forests, where we've got our tree hollows that can take, over 100 years to form, and many endangered species like powerful owls, quolls, gangs, just being completely destroyed. And that's because these regional forest agreements mean that native forest logging doesn't have to be assessed under the Act. So we are asking for those to be removed, which would be a really significant change and a really huge win, and is something that many people have been fighting really hard for these 25 years. And then the second one is that 43B, continuous use, which means that Areas of forest and bushland that had been previously cleared and have since grown back means that because it's continuous use, oh, it's already been cleared previously, therefore we can continue to do that, means that that doesn't have to be assessed under the Act either. And even if a forest bushland is relatively young, it can still be an area of critical habitat and be home to many threatened listed species. So the biggest driver of deforestation in Australia is the beef industry. And in this picture, we've got my fellow campaigner Gemma and our CEO David. And that's when they were investigating agricultural deforestation in Queensland last year, just exposing how much of a threat that is. And I think it's close to 50% of deforestation in Queensland actually happens in Great Barrier Reef catchments, which means that have the runoff, so toxic pesticides, soil running into waterways and then into the reef, which smothers coral, fuels crown of thorn outbreaks, really impacts the health of the reef, which is already under huge amount of stress due to climate change. So we're really pushing hard on getting these deforestation loopholes fixed because we see that as the biggest opportunity for a win when we're facing a lot of lack of political will to do something about our environment. So Tash was just going to show us a brief video about how deforestation harms the reef, and then we're going to get into writing time.
Do you know what happens on land doesn't stay on land? Let me explain. When land is cleared and native forests are chopped down for things like mining or agriculture, the soil loses its roots. The ground becomes unstable, and when it rains, bam, dirty sediment, pesticides and nutrients wash into rivers that flow straight to delicate ecosystems like the Great Barrier Reef, smothering and choking coral with toxic mud and poison. The dirty runoff also reduces sunlight, weakens water quality, and even fuels the outbreak of crown of thorn starfish, threatening the very survival of coral reefs like the Great Barrier Reef that is already struggling under the pressures of climate change. And this just isn't bad for coral. It of course also puts thousands of species of wildlife that call this place home at risk, as well as threatening fishing and tourism industries and coastal communities that depend on a healthy reef. But here's the good news, we can stop this. Australia is rewriting its national nature law now. That means we have a once-in-a-generation chance to close deforestation loopholes, protect forests, and give the reef a fighting chance. Decisions are being made in Parliament right now about Australia's nature laws, and Murray Watt needs to hear directly from you. You can sign the petition, send him an email, or give him a call. I did it the other day and it was super easy. So go on, make your voice matter by heading to the link in our bio.
We've got a good question here. How long minimum do you think we have to write a submission?
How long will it take, or how many?
How long does it need to be physically?
Oh, it can be whatever length you want it to be. It can be one line if you want, but we would recommend staying polite and friendly, and then also adding your name and address so that it can actually be considered by the committee.
Oh, sorry, we have both how long and the deadline.
Oh, the deadline is the 5th of December, but because we know Labor's looking to do a deal with Coalition or Greens as soon as possible, we want to get them in now, or you can finish it up tomorrow if you need to, but as soon as possible. So these are our steps for writing a submission. So Tash has posted in the chat the links that you need. So I'll just go over this really briefly. So go to our webpage. We've got a form there that you can fill in to send your letter to the Senate. And when you click submit on that, it comes to us and we'll collate them all and send them for you. So it's really simple and straightforward. Got some suggestions of what to include when you write it. And yes, it can be as short or as long as you wish. And you can copy and paste our suggestions, though I would really encourage you all to consider what matters most to you and sort of try and put it into your own words. And also consider telling personal story and introducing yourself. So that might be, I live on a farm in rural New South Wales. I've seen the impact of drought or, deforestation and the lack of birds in my area now. Something that's just really personal to you and your experience, or maybe it's somewhere you regularly go camping with your family and you're seeing the impacts of our declining natural world. And then you can press submit and we'll get them all sent in for you. I'm finishing our long Greenpeace one tomorrow as well. So I'm also writing one that I'll get in to the Senate tomorrow. So Tash, do we have any more questions, or shall we just give everyone some writing time? Because I know it's 8 o'clock because we had so many brilliant questions already.
There's a couple of questions there. I'm sorry if we haven't been able to get through to everyone, but it is starting to get a bit late. So I think it'd be good just to head straight to some writing time.
Great.
Yeah.
And while you're writing, I can try and respond to some questions in the chat.
Yeah, great. That's a good idea.
We've got a question in the chat from Linda asking who our submissions should be submitted to. So please address them to the Senate Inquiry Secretary is the best person to address it to. So I will, yeah, that's written in our submission writing guide. So to the committee secretary is the best person to address to. And then I would recommend after you finish writing your submission, then also emailing it through to your local MP and tell them you want them to represent you as their constituent. So we've also got a question about sending the chat and transcript through. We're going to be sending this recording through to everyone, and also the PDF document that's got the guide written in it for everyone to have access to. So Tash, I believe, will send that tomorrow. Gail, apologies, I'm not across the Mount Pleasant legal decision. I think if that decision's already been made, then this bill wouldn't override it, is my interpretation. But that one is probably best to go to the Environmental Defender's Office on. And I believe that they will also be having a webinar in the coming weeks as well. And yeah, Janet, I also agree about ministerial discretion reminding you of Yukon Gorge, which was a really shocking incident when Rio Tinto destroyed First Nations heritage and culture. And yes, there are concerns that without proper scrutiny, oversight, and independent watchdog, that terrible occurrences like that could happen again. So we want to remove as much ministerial discretion as possible. Yeah, so Monica, it will still count as an individual submission, even though we're sending them. So we just thought it was the simplest way to collate them all together, and send them for you, but it will still be individual. You're very welcome to do one on the Senate inquiry website. It's just quite an involved process where they make you create an account, which we decided would just be too complicated for the webinar. And there's quite a lot of steps involved. I think they do it deliberately to try and stop everyone trying to participate. But yes, please go for that if you wish, Monica. Bronze slides aren't on the website, but we can provide them all to you. Oh, Leslie, that's a great question as well. So there are a few parts of the draft that are strengthened from the previous. So yeah, some parts of the new legal architecture are positive. But yeah, ultimately it's still falling far short. There's some new rules and new standards that we support. So they're trying to actually strengthen some of those definitions, and the new Environment Protection Authority, so the EPA, that's brand new. However, the EPA is still not independent enough, but it is a good start. But ultimately, the new package just falls short of what's needed. Oh, thanks, Gio. Good on you for writing your submission. Lovely to have you here tonight. Oh, dredging ocean floors, Sue. So if you're talking about deep sea mining, I agree with you. That is a huge issue. However, that is in the high seas, so areas outside national jurisdiction. So this law only covers the nation, and then the Commonwealth waters around the nation. So deep sea mining is beyond Australia's jurisdiction. But our Pacific team here at Greenpeace are working really hard on stopping deep sea mining. So yeah, please stay connected with our work to hear more on that. Dredging in shallow waters for fishing. Do you mean long lining or bottom trawling? This is really interesting when you learn new things. I'm going to look up dredging. Because yes, there is a lot of industrial fishing that does take place in Commonwealth waters. And this act is supposed to, protect those matters of national environmental significance that industrial fishing is impacting, and should manage those industries properly. Oh, okay. Dredging is the excavation of material from the bottom of water bodies to create or maintain waterways for navigation and access. Okay, yes, it should cover dredging. So that's goes back to when a company has a project they wish to do, such as dredging. They need to then get it approved under the Act, and the Act would determine whether or not it's acceptable, or they need, conditions in place, mitigations in place, or if it's approved. So yes, dredging would be considered under it because it would be impacting the environment. Yeah, Gail, that is a really good question for areas in territories like Antarctica. I actually don't know. So that's a really great question. I will take that on notice and look it up. Because there are quite a few territories, including Christmas, Cocoa Islands, Subantarctic Islands. Yeah, I would definitely recommend everyone watch Ocean by David Attenborough. It's a really powerful film, but that is mainly bottom trawling mainly happens in the high seas, so areas outside national jurisdiction. And that's where the new Global Oceans Treaty will be really impactful in managing the biodiversity of the high seas. To wrap us up, just a really, really big thank you for all of your, thoughtful, smart, engaging questions. I feel like I learned a lot tonight. So I really, appreciate that engagement. And yeah, for us all showing up, being part of this community to really want to make a difference, to work towards a healthy environment for our reefs and forests and each other. So thank you for everything that you do. Tash and I will send out all of the follow-up, including the slides, the information to make a submission tomorrow. And if you want to continue your impact, it would be really powerful to send an email to your MP. We've got a really easy way to do that as well, asking them to create a strong new nature law. I actually sent one to my MP, separate from my work at Greenpeace, my personal email. She wrote back very quickly, was really engaged, which was brilliant. So we have a QR code behind me to do that one. And then also we've got a really great feature where you can call Murray Watt's office directly and just really give them a bit of a nudge, tell them how you feel about making sure those deforestation loopholes are closed. We've already had 200 people do that. There's a really easy how-to guide. Tash has made a video to demonstrate how to do it. Most likely you'll just get their office rather than Murray Watt himself. But can leave a message for them, and really powerful.
It actually makes it a little bit less scary. So if you get their voicemail, but the more voicemails we send, the more we hound, the more the woman on the desk is going to go, Murray, all these people are calling me, and he's going to go, right, let's fix the laws.
Thank you all so much for everything you do. You're all complete champions, and we couldn't do it without you, because together we are all powerful. So thank you for being part of Greenpeace and for joining us tonight.
Awesome, folks. Have a lovely evening from wherever you are around the country. And let's fight the good fight. And I hope you have a nice, relaxing evening and a good night's sleep.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Take care.
Take care. Bye.